Hello, good morning. Welcome to Sunrise Daily today. I'm Chamberlain. So,
indeed, good morning. It's a Wednesday morning, I think, all over Nigeria. Wherever it is you're watching us from, it's Wednesday. Well, of course, unless you're watching somewhere that is at least 24 hours ahead.
Yep.
Who knows? I'm Mal Welcome to the program.
Well, good morning. It's the 22nd day in the month of November. Welcome to the program. I'm Ayo Makinde.
Okay, well, yes, indeed. We're going to go ahead. But I think one of the interesting things, I think one of the dailies highlighted this morning is about this claim by the NMPP that the certified true copy of the judgment is in their favor. And one wonders, whoa, what's going on here? But I guess we'll see how that plays out. But if that's what is written there, because they said that's what the lawyers have told them, what they've seen there, so it means that the courts have got to offer some explanation as to what's going on there. How does that work? Because it will be very confusing if that were to be the case. So,
it would be very interesting to note whether it will be entire paragraphs and entire pages, or is it just a word or two? Because some people are talking about typographical error. Did they mistype a whole paragraph? Did they mistype a whole page? What exactly was the typographical error? Well, I mean, I think it'll be very interesting to see inside one of the dailies that is reviewing that will be, given that story.
Because I mean, if it's the part that they're talking about is I think page 67 of that 72. So I think we'll have to bring in those legal minds to just come through and see, look, what exactly does this mean now? But it will be very interesting because, I mean, even if we were to go ahead and read that, it was talking about the judgment of the tribunal, the petition, so, and then the part that was signed by Samuel Abraham Adume, who happens to be Justice of the Court of Appeal, and then it's all there. So, is there any precedent to this kind of matter? Never heard it before, though, where a judgment is said to have gone in a particular way, but the CTC shows something entirely different because they had raised concerns as to wanting to receive this document early enough. But now that they've got it, so we'll see what explanation they'll offer about this one.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
Another scenario yesterday on the floor of the Senate. Did you see that? What was that about, though? I mean, the senators from, I think, largely Labour Party.
Labour Party, yes.
And they had it way beyond up to here. And they thought, Mr. Senate President, you kind of be choosing this kind of things for us. But I don't know if that explanation that he gave did suffice, because he says, look, just merely read out what was on the paper. So two very interesting scenarios which we'll keep tabs on. So that he clearly just wouldn't have it. So was it a misunderstanding on his part or that of the Senate President? But it took them a while, though.
That's Senator Tony Oye there of the Labour Party.
It took them a while before they eventually sorted it out.
I like the energy, though. I like the energy. That's the energy we want to see from opposition parties. Bring it on. Let us feel the pulse of the opposition within the Senate. But on the matter of, to which they brought it for, well, that's another kettle of fish. I don't think that's well, but I think it's important if that's not who they voted for, because I think the biggest issue that they have, I mean, here's the issue now. The Court of Appeal, which is where the cases for legislature, for members of the legislature ends, seems to have sacked two leaders in the minority caucus. So right now, it's like two slots were vacant, and they were trying to fill those slots temporarily.
Senator Darlington and Senator Marcom.
Oh, well, I think Senator Abba Moro has now been selected as
to replace Senator Marcom.
Indeed. And then another senator was selected as minority whip. Yeah. Now, where the controversy really arose was for the Senate minority whip. So the Labour Party believes that because they also have up to 7 slots out of the number of seats reserved, well, out of the number of seats in the entire Senate, they think that they should have more than 1 slot in the minority caucus. But according to the Senate president, you know, they didn't have the numbers to be able to make that particular complaint. There have been questions, Chamberlain, as to whether it is really the people who are in the minority who are choosing their leaders themselves, or somehow the majority party has had an influence in helping to select minority members that they can work with.
Quotes.
Exactly. So, quote, thank you very much for helping me put that. They can work with. So we're seeing this controversy on the floor of the Senate yesterday. It was very interesting. Is it that all members of the minority caucus were dissatisfied with that, or the controversy was that, oh, this person you have picked is also from the PDP, and we as members of the Labour Party deserve an extra slot, given that, you know, we also constitute a majority minority in this Senate. You have to give us more than one slot. I mean, that was the basis. That was the complaint I heard on the floor of the Senate yesterday. And the Senate president said, what are you talking about? Out of 47 members, I have 41 signatures here. If, you know, this is what this situation is, I'm not going to, he says, I'm not going to give you something else. I'm only going to read the truth. When I heard that, I chuckled. I chuckled to myself, and I said, Senate President, the truth. Well, we have been bringing some truths to you for some time now, and we haven't heard anything. Do we have to be members of the National Assembly first before we get listened to about those appointments, those resident electoral commissioners' appointment, some of whom have been pointed to as being partisan? We haven't quite heard any reaction from the Senate even up until now. So when they talk about the truth, the question, that truth is very, very subjective indeed. So, but that was a controversy on the floor of the Senate yesterday. As I said, I love the energy of the minority of the Labour Party senators, and we hope to see that sort of energy on other matters that concerns Nigerians. I mean, we hope to see them holding the feet of the leading political party in the Senate to the fire. Not just, you know, assuming nothing happens, at least assuming nothing changes with the leadership here, everyone will know that at least Labour Party voiced their resentment. If we had seen a sort of debate with regards to the appointments of resident electoral commissioners, you know, it would have been good. It would have been, if we had seen a sort of, you know, no, we're not going to have this, or even a walkout, or whatever it was that we saw. But to just have total silence on that particular matter, it did not speak well of the opposition. So I think it's a good thing that somehow they found their voice. I think it's up to Nigerians really to determine whether they are happy on the issue that they found their voice for. After all, it's better.
I can almost guess
what
they'll think about this voice, this voice that's been found now.
Because of course, when it comes to principal officers, there are perks that go with that office, you know. All the principal officers get something a little more than their regular members. First among equals or second among equals, as the case might, whatever rank it is that they are, they usually get a little more. But I don't know if that's about that. It will be totally up to Nigerians to determine, but it's a good thing to at least hear the voice of the opposition on the floor of the Senate. Ayo.
Well, isn't that the reason that they have seats in the first place? Isn't that the reason we have minority leaders? Isn't that the reason they are in, you know, the National Assembly, so that their voices also can be heard? Even if the majority is going to have their way, at least the minority will have their say. But have we been hearing that voice? I mean, Malpo, you took that question right out of my mouth. And the issue of the Rex is not the only one that we should have heard the voice of the minority caucus loudly and clearly. How about the 160 million naira allegedly, let me use that word, meant or budgeted for an SUV for each member of maybe the Senate or the National Assembly, I don't know. How about that one? What was their voice? And, you know, when we were having that conversation yesterday, Chamberlain, with the Senate, the chairman on electoral matters, he said that, look, the committee of the whole was the one that decided the issue of the Rex, because the committees, the various committees that should have handled the matter, were not already inaugurated at the time. So the question is, what's the rush Right now, they are not in the office yet. I don't think they have resumed duties, and I also do not think that a good number of them will resume until next year, when the terms of those who are in office right now are done and dusted. So what's the rush? Can we still revisit it? Maybe not. I don't know. But we haven't heard anything, by the way, from the National Assembly about that particular matter of the resident electoral commissioners. So in what other areas are we yet to hear the voice of the opposition in the National Assembly, at least, okay? Maybe not opposition, maybe that of the minority caucus. We've been talking and shouting our voices hoarse about the stolen crude. I also want to believe that they have a say in that one as well. How come we're not hearing it? And we're not addressing this just to the individuals now, because it would seem like the issue was between one senator and another senator being the president of the Senate. More than that, how the issue now is between within the National Assembly, within the minority caucus and the Senate itself. So that's what the issue is here, and our eyes should be squarely focused on that one. So how come we're not hearing their voices in these other issues? It is always the opposition that heads the Public Accounts Committee of the Senate, or if there is anyone else in the House of Representatives. How come we aren't hearing their voices yet? We saw in the dailies yesterday the Senate was saying that they're unhappy with the fact that some MDAs haven't been repatriating some funds to the federal government, querying the fact that some of those things, the details are not available. Shouldn't we be hearing their voices in that regard as well before now? So that whenever they speak about matters that concern individually, their political parties, Nigerians will say, okay, you have a right to fight for your political party, especially because you have been fighting for Nigerians. So I think that message should be drummed in. Markwe, I am with you on the fact that now they have found their voice. Amazing. Can we increase the volume? Timberlake.
Okay, now that they found their voice.
What are they gonna do
Okay.
with it?
We are counting. It might be early in the day yet, so after this, it might be history. But take a look at, let's go through the dailies, and there's some interesting scenarios here. Look at the Vanguard newspaper first. So yesterday, service chiefs were in the National Assembly, the House of Reps, which informs this headline: why insecurity is not going away yet, ascribed to service chiefs. Warders assisting imprisoned Boko Haram insurgents to operate, ascribed to Chief of Defense Staff. Says armed forces underfunded. So it's a regular soundtrack now. Adds Finnish government protecting Simon Ekpa. Alleges Ekpa sabotaging security agencies' efforts in Southeast. How can that happen? So if they know that's what's going on, I don't understand this big deal. You'd have thought they should be able to ensure that this is history. If they know what's going on, deal with it. Cost of aviation fuel, introduction of surcharges affecting Nigerian Air Force operations, ascribed to air chiefs. So when the government says we met the objective of removing fuel subsidy, think on this one. I met battered police force, IGP. Laments police personnel grossly inadequate. Insecurity will soon be over, Defense Minister. So he's on a different page, probably.
Not really. I mean, he had his own list of woes as well, but summarizing it all, it will soon be over if you address all of these other issues that have been raised.
Okay, now this headline says, insecurity will soon be over, Defense Minister. The lead story says, why insecurity is not going away yet. So it's not going away yet, but it will soon be over. What's that? What message do you leave with when you hear this?
This is the obstacle on why. These are the obstacles that we need to address. If we address them, it will soon be over.
Well, I think service chiefs should have also said this, because this is service chiefs. Where is the caveat now? So anyway, this is the Defense Ministry speaking. And then security, welfare of people, primary purpose of governments. Well, Speaker Abbas, yeah. Declare national emergency on kidnapping. Huriwa urges Tinubu. So all of that with this lead story. So if they say it will be over soon, how soon is this soon? Or shouldn't we be a little more, concerned be 4 years or 8 years? Because we've been battling Boko Haram now for how many years, guys? That's your answer. Now look about what is interesting on the front page. Crowd welcomes Kano governor. And then the underneath one here says, Mammoth crowd welcomes Governor Abba Yusuf of Kano State after the appeal court judgment recently. And you wonder, okay, so it's up to you now, lawyers. Let's see what the courts. Would there be an error? I don't know. We'll wait.
And if there is, which one do they go with? Is it the judgment as delivered by the judges in terms of their oral delivery? Is it recorded usually? Or is it what is in the certified true copy of the judgment, assuming there were to be an error?
Speaking of which, look at this above this list story. Overturning Kano, Zamfara, Plateau voters' decision in court unacceptable. Guess who? Obasanjo. So,
he's had a lot to say about democracy of late, but I think that everyone should read fully all that he said on liberal democracy and why it's here to deliver fully for Africans and not just run with the headlines. Because if you run with the headlines, you'll be totally misled. You will miss the entire picture of what he's painting about how minorities also need to be carried along in how decisions are made when it comes to this democracy of ours. So even if you are the legitimate majority, you have to govern over everybody. And the decision of the minority, or will I say the voice of the minority, is also equally important. Part of what he said is that he believes that's why we're not exactly making progress. Somehow it looks like sometimes the voice of the majority is also unimportant with the kind of decisions that we're seeing these days.
I thought it's the other way.
How do you mean?
Minority will have their say. Majority will have their way.
So that is it. That's why the court judgments are very interesting, because if somehow what is being contested in the courts these days are not the judgments themselves, are not the
technicalities,
are not the votes themselves, then a big question is if it's technicalities that is now swaying it.
Part of the process.
Yeah, well, then it continues to explain why it is our democracy is under delivery. New Telegraph is the one I'm looking at for you now, and it's following very strongly from what we heard on the floor of the House of Representatives. Look at that. Nigerians expect magic from ill-motivated police force. That's according to the IGP. That's what is on the front page there. As service chiefs seek more funding, good governance curbs insecurity. That's according to CDS. Issue executive order on state, local government police to strengthen national police. Afenifere tells Tinubu, pages 2 and 6, where you'll find that. And look at that. Senate session turns rowdy as PDP takes 3 minority leadership seats. It's unfair, unjust, unacceptable. That's according to Labour Party. And just in case you're wondering, Wike raises the alarm over fake CFOs in Abuja, says he saved 110 billion naira in 3 months. So beware the era of fake CFOs. Be sure that what you have in your hand is the real one. Unpaid fees. Federal government revokes 1,633 solid minerals titles. That story is on page 8. And look at this. Currency swap. Trade facilitation boosts CBN's yuan auction, beg your pardon, to 9.22 billion yuan. So you find details on page 3 of the paper. Let's leave it there for New Telegraph.
Well, something related is right there on the front page of the Nigerian Observer this morning, and it's also talking about insecurity, but the angle is a little different. Strategy change resounds as insurgents ambush Yobe governor's convoy. What does this mean? Well, you have to read the story. It's right there on the front page. And the story continues on page 2 of the paper today, looking at what that could mean. The details are right there. Well, that's a picture story of the Nigerian creative industry visiting the vice president. And above the nameplate, Edo HOS, PDP Eshan Group, others hail Obaseki on Good Governance Award. Find the details of that story continue on page 2 of the paper this morning. That's the Nigerian Observer today.
The Guardian newspaper, amid heavy dockets, electoral cases overwhelm judges, justice system. So that's what you see right here. And that they have all of that breakdown for you on the front page of Vanguard here today. That's the Guardian.
Is there a danger that we could be running out of time? I mean, judges could be running out of time, though, to look at the electoral cases? That could
likely.
Okay. Well, look at Daily Trust now. That's the paper that has a story for you. Confusion over contradictions in CTC of appeal court judgment sacking Kano governor. So, just in case you're wondering, confusion over contradictions in certified true copy, that's what CTC means, of appeal court judgment sacking Kano governor. It's typographical error, Governor's Council, APC chieftain. Well, page 5 says, only Supreme Court will interpret it, says Governor Yusuf's lawyer. So that's what you see right there. And then you also see other stories just right beneath the nameplate. Reps indict MPA, NNPC, NBET over 14 trillion naira contingent liabilities. Well, let's leave it there for all Daily Trust newspapers.
This Nigeria, Obasanjo tackles appeal court over sack of Kano, Zamfara, Plateau governors. Powers vested in the few judges, totally unacceptable. That's some explanation there. Anxiety as Plateau Assembly Speaker, Deputy resigned. So they're feeling the heat already. So, I mean, yes, you need to continue further reading of this. And the former president says, powers vested in the few judges, totally unacceptable. So what context could that be? Well, it's always good to take a look at this, really. Well, that ends it with a look at some of the dailies here today. We will be back in a moment. Stay on with us.
We appreciate criticism. We appreciate the fact that people can look at us in the face and say that you need to do well in this place. So we don't have a problem with the originator of an open letter with me. In fact, we like it, and we want to thank him. And that's to say that indeed, if it's a government that is transparent and is responsible, we should not shy away from criticism. But it's only when criticism is malicious, is unintended, and begins to misrepresent the truth, that's when there's a problem. And I'm sure that the officers in Lagos State, they've all come out to show that indeed you can make mistakes on some lines of item. I hear that there was a particular one in which an item was meant to be 2 million, it was written as 2 billion. Let me say that the website that we created is an Excel sheet website. And so if you know how Excel sheets work sometimes, indeed, if they are not monitoring very well, your numbers can indeed be extrapolated and they can be turned around. So for us, I want to say that I'm leading a team of dedicated public officers. I'm leading a team of committed civil servants. I'm leading a team of self-motivated public officers that want to stand and say that they can be above, but they can indeed stand and be recognized with anyone.
Well, that controversy is not going anywhere anytime soon. The governorship candidate of the Action Democratic Congress, ADC, in Lagos State, Funsho Doherty, joins us this morning. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Should we actually say The whistleblower is here.
Not quite.
Well, first of all, let's begin with the response of Mr. Governor. How satisfied are you? What are your impressions?
No, it's a good response, and I think that that's what a governor should do. You should recognize that when you occupy a position like that, it's a position of trust, and that you are responsible to the people you govern. So I think it's a good response. I think more importantly will be how do they deal with the issues that have been raised? How do they close whatever gaps have been identified? And how prepared are they to walk the talk? Because it's not just about making the statements, it's about your actual actions.
Well, let's use the example that he also cited, talking about the 2 million naira as for fragrance, and he also cited the fact that it was created on Excel. Now, I don't know how to use Excel, but I know how it works. Just as he said, it is natural that if configured properly, if you calculate or tabulate in a particular way, the figures add up. So I can excuse an additional 0 to, or someone mistakenly added 1 0. I might even be able to excuse a second 0, making it, say, 200 million. But a third 0, now that would sound like someone was actually intending to do something, wouldn't you say? Let's stick with that example for a bit.
Well, I mean, it will be difficult to kind of draw conclusions as to how that happened, and I don't think I would want to speculate. But the reality of it is that these reports are produced pursuant actually to the Public Procurement Agency Act, which specified that significant government contracts should actually be published. So the government is actually complying with the law in doing this. Commendable in a sense, but it's their own law they are complying with. Yeah. So it is then important that the report that you put out must have integrity, right? So it must, the figures, people must be able to rely on them. You would expect that there would be a review process for the information before it appears in the public domain. So even if there were going to be these kinds of errors, normal operations should suggest that a review process should bring out errors like this. In any event, I think that however it may have occurred, this is for the government to now go back and look at it and say, how did it happen? How do we fix it? How do we ensure it doesn't happen again? If indeed it was an error, which we are giving them the benefit of the doubt to say, and I want to make it forcefully. It's one thing to make an error. It's another thing to not be forthright in the way you respond to that error when it is pointed out or when that is picked out. So the governor has spoken, and he seems to have spoken well. But if you look at the response, and they've responded to the letter we wrote. Yeah. If you look at the response on this particular item, the PPA agency, rather than being forthright and representing that it was an error, basically in their comment is saying that our comment is not the case and that it is actually 2 million and that is what is on their website. Do you see what I mean? Whereas what they had done was after we prepared our report, they went and they adjusted it on the website. So it's okay to make an error. Errors happen. But be forthright with the people, because when you are not forthright, people then start to ask the next question that what else are you not being forthright about?
Well, perhaps the difference is in the fact that this is a prepared statement from the PPA. The Lagos State Governor didn't read the speech. He spoke extemporaneously, yeah. So he could have, said those things, as you said, as statemently as possible. But then, of course, that the PPA is set up by the government to ensure its own transparency, and only recently, too. The law was reviewed, and signed recently. But then there are still so many documents that some civil society organizations feel that, look, no one should even tell you that you need to put this out for the people. For instance, going on the downloads segment of that website, you'll see that the Lagos State Procurement Agency annual report, the latest, the most recent, was released in 2020. We haven't heard of anyone in 2021, not in 2022. And also speaking to PLSI, an agency that prepares an annual state of states, finances, also says that in most cases, Lagos state government has been largely unresponsive to their requests, and they have a report coming out in the month of March. So it questions the whole process of transparency or full transparency.
Yes, I think there's some truth to that, and we should always push the envelope in terms of holding the feet of the government and its agencies to the fire, not just to do the work, but to put out the information, and where there are gaps, to insist that they do the right thing. And I think that's the spirit, actually, of this work that we've done, to say that, when people know that there is a searchlight on them, when people know that others are watching, they sit up and they act differently. And I think that, I led this, but any other citizen could have done it, right? So, and maybe I have the profile of being a politician, and so, it gave it wings in a sense. But the way it has caught on, right? So this particular tweet got about 7.5 million views. I don't think anything I've ever tweeted before has ever had that kind of response. So it tells you that it touched a nerve that people have. And more importantly, people have now gone further to start doing their own work and coming up with things that even we did not see, and all of that. And some are now talking about other states and so on. So this is a process, a very positive, self-reinforcing process that is an important component of democracy. And these are the things that help democracy to mature.
Sometimes the challenge is not that these things happen. The challenge is for how long they have been happening. And some of the coinages, some of the terms, one of your comments, for instance, about the Blue Rail project is that, look, isn't this supposed to be a public-private partnership to which we are still budgeting some 40 billion plus on? And I'm sure you have seen the response of the Lagos state government to that one, saying that, it's to bolster something. What's your response to that?
So that particular point had to do with the operation and maintenance of the Blue Rail, which initially was to have been done by a private operator who is experienced in operating rail systems, because it's not, you don't just get up and start operating rail systems, right? But it appears the project has moved away from that. What they are now doing is to purchase the operation and maintenance infrastructure and then to operate it, working with the contractor who built the rail system. That's their response, and we're still studying their response, and we will have a further feedback with respect to those responses. The question that obviously then arises is, is that capacity there? The person who built the rail, is he a rail operator? Why are you expecting him to operate the rail system? Is that what they do? And so on and so forth. So these are some of the questions, the larger questions that we try to address in that statement. The next thing on the Blue Rail, of course, is the fact that we've now awarded another one for the second phase at about 200 and plus billion. And we know the experience we've had on the first one. We started this journey back in 2008 or so, and we're only just commencing limited operations now. So the question that we had is, how are you going to ensure that this thing we're now starting phase 2 in 2023, it is not in 2040 that we will be commissioning it. And part of the idea is that there was funding gap and so on and so forth. But part of what you do when you do a project like this is to try and ensure you have the funding in place so that does not become a a millstone around your neck. So these are some of the issues that we've raised.
But even to this one that you just raised now, the 200 billion plus or so, the reason they give for that, how satisfactory is it for you that because of the significant delays, that the significant delays were due to insufficient funds?
To me, it's not. To me, that's not the answer. To me, is not an answer, right? Because the question is, the last project was maybe 15 years overdue, and we don't actually know what the cost is. How are you going to prevent it going forward? The answer to that is not the reason why the old one was because we didn't have money. The answer is you are starting a new one today. What are you doing today to ensure that the experience of the past is not there today? It's always easy to start something. But when you start projects, you start it. Financing is an integral part of the process. So typically for a program like this, you should have a financing plan, a financing arrangement that says we're finishing this thing in 4 years. And the reason we know we'll finish in 4 years is because the financing is, these and X, Y, and Z financings are in place. And we know that operationally and financially, we have the capacity to finish it within the time that we say we will.
It's a very challenging one because I remember that the entire issues around rail projects in Lagos State started way back in the Second Republic, and we're only just commencing it now. But you know, in all of these, I see three classes of people involved. When the governor, for instance, said that it's a typographical error, my mind is still finding it difficult to work around that one. I see three classes of people working in any government, and in Lagos State government, no doubt, no less. First is the politician who is elected. Second is the politician who appoints people who are appointed. And then there is a class of the civil servants who are employed. And down through the ages, questions have arisen about the system through which these things run. So when people talk about corruption in government, generally people look at just a politician. But looking at these three classes of people, would you say that the Lagos State government is corrupt?
So my view is that there are elements of inefficiency and corruption across the three tiers that you identified, not just in Lagos State, but across government, across the Federation. And I think this is an issue that has bedeviled us for many years. And unless we deal with it decisively, as a country and as a state, we will not achieve meaningful quantum development. So let me give you an example. You know, we've had almost a generation, almost 30 years, since this latest iteration of our democracy. You know, Singapore is always cited as a country that moved from third world to first world in the span of a generation. An important component of that is that this corruption issue was dealt with decisively. And therefore, the actions that governments generally across the nation took were such that they were in the best interests of the people, and they moved the nation forward every step of the way. Self-interest, they had mechanisms for ensuring that self-interest and corruption in public officers were dealt with. Not lip service, with sincerity. And I think that that's part of what, if we want to be honest with ourselves, and sincerity is a big problem in Nigeria, if we want to be honest with ourselves, that is where we've had a gap. Now, I just want to make one last point on this thing you raised about the three tiers of government. You see, the most critical level, actually, is the elected office. Why do I say that? I would say the elected office and the civil servants. But if I had to put primacy, I would say elected office. Because we have not had a shortage of people who come in as political appointees. They'll serve for 3 or 4 or 5 years. They are very good. They work very hard. They are honest. All right? They come in, they do the work. They go. but the system does not change. And when they go and the next person comes, if that person has a different bent, you see a very different outcome. The people who can change the system, the people who have the capacity to change the system, is the elected people.
So you're saying, in effect, that the elected officials in Lagos State are corrupt?
I said that I believe, in my opinion, I believe that there are elements of corruption to be found in all the tiers that you've identified. And it's not just in Lagos, it's across. Not just government, but also in society.
You know, generally, I'm speaking about this particular one. I remember speaking with a colleague in civil society yesterday, and he was saying, look, Lagos is suspected to be the beacon, the standard in Nigeria. That's why I'm asking specifically about Lagos, and if it can be dealt with decisively in Lagos, then it should be dealt with decisively elsewhere.
Certainly, you have the elements of it in Lagos as they are elsewhere, but the cost in Lagos is particularly high because of the wherewithal that Lagos has. And the cost in terms of the difference between what we accomplish and what we could accomplish is particularly egregious in the case of Lagos. Because if we get it right here, I mean, the sky's the limit.
Well, what's interesting is that you are not the only one looking at the figures, as you said. Civil society is, even the Africa Development Bank has looked and has made some comments. But my colleague Markwe has a question or two for you. Go ahead, Markwe.
Indeed, thank you very much, Ayo. It's so good to see you, Mr. Doherty.
Hi,
and some people will say, well, it's a good thing that they're beginning to hear the voice of opposition as well. I do not know whether you've done this as somebody who ran against the current governor. Your party and yourself ran against the current governor in the last elections. And some people will say, well, this is what the opposition should be doing. We shouldn't just hear their voice just before election. So right now, would you consider yourself as doing what an opposition member should be doing, or would you just say you're just being an active citizen?
So I think it's both, right, Markwe? The fact of the matter is that I did contest and I'm an opposition politician. But I think what I've done, any citizen can and actually should do, anybody who feels strongly enough about it. These are public figures, public statistics, records, and, like I said, anyone can do it. I think that it is particularly incumbent on opposition politicians to not go to sleep also, because they are part of the governance structure. I was saying on an interview 2 days ago that democracy is not synonymous with good outcomes. In Africa, we don't have a shortage of democracies when you look across the continent, but we have a shortage of good outcomes. And the difference, one of the critical elements in ensuring that you have a good outcome in a democratic system is that you have checks and balances. And one of the most important checks and balances is the actions and activities of the opposition politicians to hold those in power to their feet to the fire and ensure that they do not have an unfettered ability to not discharge their public trust.
So this is something we should be expecting more often from you and your party. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And by the way, this is not the first intervention I've made on this. If you go back and look at, it's just the one that perhaps resonated the most. Like I was saying a couple of minutes ago, if you look at the number of things I've spoken about. In fact, this issue of procurement, I have spoken about it in the past. And one of the things I said, which I hope they will look at in light of this latest development, is I said that based on a letter that was leaked at the time the mass burial issue in Lagos arose, I wrote a letter to say that the Public Procurement Agency gets an admin fee on each procurement that goes through them. And that was a perverse incentive, and that thing ought to be removed, because that you don't have a situation where you have somebody who is doing review and oversight of a process who benefits commercially from that process, or from the outcome of the process, and that it would impair their independence. And I said it at the time. So I hope they address it as part of the issues that they address in fixing the processes that may lead to lapses. I hope they address it in this cycle.
Well, there'll be arguments for and against that, because some people also say that, I mean, the procurement office, while they were making their own statement, were saying something about them being an independent entity of the Lagos state government. So, I mean, one of the ways, I'm sure, maybe they're trying to keep them independent is to ensure that they have a way of funding them that maybe is not directly tied to the government. I don't know if that's an argument that you buy, but I want to quickly take you up on the issue which another opposition figure has raised, and I don't know if you've come across it, which is the issue of 200 million naira paid to legal entities. The governorship candidate of the Labour Party, Gbadebo Rhodes Vival, tweeted from his own account that these are figures that he's come across, paid to legal entities, that when they sued the Lagos state, when they sued the candidates in the elections who are now governor and deputy governor, they sued them as candidates, not the government of Lagos state. I do not know if you came across those figures and if you took any objection to them.
Yeah, so it's interesting. The review that we did was for the second quarter and third quarter. And actually, this item was raised in response by one of the people who responded to our tweet to raise this issue. And then Gbadebo now amplified it. But this happened in the first quarter of this year, which our review did not cover. But I've subsequently gone back and looked at it. And there is, in fact, that award there. And you can see that there are 4 payments of 50 million each that were made to 4 law firms. Well, I won't call them payments. Let me say there are 4 awards to 4 law firms in the amount of 50 million each. And this is in respect to a suit which was brought by the PDP against the governor and 42 others. And so that also clearly is an issue, right? Because the government should not be using public funds for the personal defense of either the governor or any other political appointee in a political matter. And so the government will also need to respond to that, to say were those contracts actually awarded, were the payments actually made. Even if you argue that the payments were not made, which I heard a Lagos state official say on a program yesterday that payments were not made, the governor did not approve it. You still have to ask the question, how did it get to an award stage? Because that question remains. So these are issues that the government will need to deal with.
Well, I was just looking at, I think we can take this back to Lagos now. Chairman, you have questions?
Well, thank you, Malkwe. Just a quick one. In all of these reports and all of these indictments that you have brought up, isn't this supposed to go through the House of Assembly at some point? Or is this something that the House of Assembly missed?
Which one are you referring to now? The awards?
Yes, the whole procurement document and the gaps that you noticed.
Presumably the House should be aware of it. We didn't write directly to the House. We wrote to the governor. Okay. And it's an open letter, so presumably, and it's been in the public domain and all of that. So, a legislature that is alive to its responsibilities and believes that there is need for action or oversight on their part, will rise to whatever is required of them. There's an element of this also where, they make judgments as to what oversight they should have, the extent of that oversight, at what point oversight becomes meddling in executive, activities and all of that. So that's a balance of power that they will have to strike amongst themselves. But I think what we have to do is to bring out the issues. Government is the government, whether it's legislature, whether it's executive. We should raise it with the government and ensure that the processes and checks and balances that are built into government operate.
But we're out of time, Mr. Doherty, but let me just quickly squeeze this in. The AFDB put out a report from millions to billions. I don't know if you've seen that report, also indicting the Lagos State government. Part of the statement says the relatively high capital component of Lagos State's budget, that's 58%, does not always translate into implementation of basic infrastructure and services for the city's poorest people. In fact, this statement was made twice in two different contexts.
Yes.
What do you make of this, and what should be the response of the Lagos State government in action to reverse this trend?
So I am also of the view that government expenditure could be a lot more, one, efficient, two, effective in terms of creating an inclusive society with shared prosperity. Let me just use one point to make that, to bring that point home. One of the things that you see being touted in government expenditure is the fact that most of government's expenditure is capital expenditure, and that less is recurrent, right? And that is used to make almost a blanket justification to say we're spending money well because we are using most of our money on capital expenditure, and and sometimes we borrow money to do that, and it's capital expenditure. But you have to ask, what is the efficiency associated with those capital expenditures? Because if you spend money on capital expenditure, but you spend it inefficiently, you are actually making people worse off. So I think that when we think about Lagos and we think about the resources that Lagos has, its budget for this year is 1.7 trillion. When you compare that to the outcomes of people's lives, and you measure it by things like quality of living, standard of living, those kinds of livability indices where Lagos continually falls at the bottom, you have to reach the conclusion that we could have done a lot more with the resources that we have than what we have.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time this morning. So many other issues to raise, but we have to leave it at this point. The governorship candidate of the ADC in Lagos State, Funsho Doherty, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you for having me.
We're back right after now. Do stay with us, there's more.
All right, welcome back. We are continuing our conversation about the procurement process and the figures all over the place. So we do have NOB here with us. She's the former country director, Action Aid, former convener, Nigeria Civil Society Situation Room, as well as Olusegun Elemo, who is the executive director of Paradigm Leadership Support Initiative. Thank you both for coming on today. Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning, Nigerians.
Well, Mr. B, let me start with you. This scenario, ever since the news has been out there, what have you found?
I think for me it's a very good development, to have, citizens trying to track, not just from the opposition, but citizens trying to track, what is happening in governance. That's accountability. It's about holding government accountable, and if everybody is waking up, or this is a process that has been started a long time, and I think I'm really excited because I lived in Lagos for over 20 years, and the governance issues in Lagos in terms of activity level or people trying to hold government accountable is not just a beginning. Lagos state government is one of the states that started upload in terms of their budgets, onto the internet. So it's a good thing that the government, even the governor, is welcoming, is having that openness. We have budget tracking, having the budget of the year and people just letting things go. I think is now coming out, and the signs that is coming out from Lagos is also something that everybody needs to look around. It's just a sign from Lagos State. What about the other states? What about the things that people have done in the past? You find items that are on the budget that are just they're just numb there. And if you backtrack, go to so many states, budgets, many items that you see this year, you see it last year, the year before, or so many, 10 years down the line, and nobody is querying it. So this is the beginning of a good thing to happen. I think people are now getting to settle down after the general election and all of that. And so what we have found is, you see, somebody is the insensitivity of government. I think a lot of people, in terms of trust, in terms of the poverty level, Nigeria still, they try to defend it, but Nigeria still is the poverty capital of Nigeria, of the world, where you have a lot of poor people, where you have the indices in terms of maternal mortality or child mortality, in terms of health, gender-responsive public service, and the issues of life expectancy in Nigeria and unemployment in Nigeria. And then you find it's good that we're putting all of this in the public domain, that somebody is not just starting from here. It started from the National Assembly, the amount of money that they want to use to buy bulletproof vehicles and all of that. And now you have a chief of staff having to have, these are things that may have even gone 440.7 million for a car in a place that people are going to bed hungry every night. If you take that to a town or a semi-village or a local government, you know how the transformation that will happen in this land. I think our leaders are so far, away from the lead that they are not understanding what is happening. They are young people who have not had a job for more than 7 years, who have graduated and are qualified. They defend that some people are not qualified, but what about the qualified people? And so you have these people, and then you are taking a whooping sum to go and buy a car. Where is the road that you are even passing? Nigeria, we don't have good roads. A lot of the roads, they are trying, but Nigeria is a huge country. If you are serious about development, roads and such infrastructure is not even under debate anymore. It's taken that you have good roads and you have electricity, you have the issues of unemployment. Many of our industries fell down. I remember when the textile industries were going down, about 70 billion was what was requested just to refund some of it. But we're having all of these things going down. So what we find is more activity, and we encourage civil society organizations, citizens in every state of Nigeria. The closest government to the people is even the local government, which has been sort of mutilated so much. And the money that is going down there is also the same thing. They come and gather and share. The issue of corruption is real. I'm happy that the governor, appreciates and welcomes the discussion, but let the discussion go on. Okay, because just like what was said earlier, if you put 2 billion instead of 2 million, it adds up at the end of the day. So what happens? Who approves? So let's pay attention to budgets.
So Segun, as somebody who has been involved in accountability reforms for subnationals, does this pass the accountability test for you?
No, it doesn't really. And there are many factors at play. Let me just say that what Mr. Duhati brought out is nothing new from what civil society have been doing for many years. Only that he also acknowledged it because he's a politician. He's able to throw some political weight behind findings that...
throwing civil society weight.
Oh, no, people don't really take us seriously. And I said that jokingly. But if people take us seriously, we're putting all of this information out for many years. There are many credible organizations. You can talk about budget, you can talk about connected development, you can talk about PLSI, you can talk about a few others, who work in the public accountability ecosystem and use, fiscal information. And like what Madam Enobi said, we do tracking, and look at all of this budget information to procurement, to audit. What I see, that is wrong, and I keep saying it. Lagos is supposed to be a model state, and if Lagos doesn't pass the test of accountability with the huge resources that is available to it, I mean, you see the IGR shooting up every year. You see federal transfer, shooting up every year, and then you see how funds are managed, and it's not so much translating to development compared to the amount of money that is available to the state when you look at what is on the ground. Again is that when you then look at, for instance, what the state, how the state responded. To our subnational audit efficacy index, for instance, in 2022, which we presented earlier this year, the state came, 18th position and scored 36.
So let's have a look at that now. So that was for 2022.
Yeah, that was for 2022.
And the ranking, you say, it was 18th.
18th position.
And the score was
36%. And you could see that the score was very
31.
31%.
Out of what is this? 100?
Out of 100. Out of 100. And that 18th position is actually because many states also did not perform very well. When you look at the preceding year, which is the 2021, you saw that the state came 35th position. The only reason Lagos State came 18th position in the last assessment was because the Public Accounts Committee actually responded to some of the information that we requested. But we have started conducting the assessment for the 2023 SA Index, which we will present in the first quarter of 2024. And let me just put it out here. We have received response from over 90%. I mean, 90% of the states. We assess all the 36 states, and over 90% of the states have responded. But Lagos State has not responded.
Give us some background in terms of the methodology,
indicators for
this index.
So, for instance, what we for the 2022 assessment, we employed 8 parameters. In looking at the parameters, the audit legal framework, and for the audit legal framework, we're looking at the financial autonomy for the Office of the Auditor General, as well as administrative independence for the Office of the Auditor General. Lagos State does not pass that test. So you could say that the procurement agency is independent, but is the Office of the Auditor General independent? And this is the foremost accountability institution that the Constitution recognizes. Section 125 is clear. If we are not practicing democracy, let's know we are not practicing democracy. But the drafters of the Constitution did not envisage that we are going to, at one point, be setting up anti-corruption agencies. And that states will be setting up anti-corruption bodies. Democracy is self-healing.
Let nobody talk about that democracy cannot, translate to development. The democracy is self-healing, and all those instruments of development are embedded in democracy. The only problem is that we are not practicing democracy in Nigeria. No.
Democracy.
Yeah, that is the point. Now, that's the first parameter. So Lagos State does not pass that set. The report of the annual report of the Auditor General that is supposed to be submitted to the Parliament, Lagos State does not pass the test. The Citizens Accountability Report that is supposed to be published annually, Lagos State does not pass the test. The full audit report, not the audited financial statement. I keep saying it everywhere. There are two distinct documents. The audited financial statement is different from the audit report. The audit report contains domestic findings of the Auditor General as to how public funds have been utilized. What you see in the audited financial statement are just breakdown of quantitative data.
So they don't give the full budget.
They
don't upload the full budget.
They are there. It's not out. You can ask the Office of the Auditor General for Lagos State. Where is the audit report for Lagos State for the last 10 years? Can you show us where they are? Where are the domestic reports that are submitted to the Parliament? What did the Parliament find out through its Public Account Committee? And where are the queries of the Auditor General on how funds were utilized in Lagos State? I mean, that's the function of the Auditor General.
So is it that this appears to you, based on these parameters, as carefully choreographed?
Absolutely. And that's what we're saying, that if we want to see development, whether in any sector, whether in education, health, whatever sector you talk about, you have to look at how public funds, for instance, how public policies are crafted, and from that policy instrument emanates budget documents, procurement information like Mr. Doherty is bringing out, and then audit information. It's a chain, and all of these leads to something.
So, for the avoidance of doubt, if they wanted to disagree with you, what are the criteria that you expect them to meet in order to pass this accountability test?
Number one, financial autonomy for the Office of the Auditor General. We need to see that, and we need to be able to independently verify that the Office of the Auditor General is getting its funds first-line charge from the state's joint account. Move straight. You don't treat the Office of the Auditor General like a clerk or like a petty cashier. No, that's how it's been treated. Number two, administrative autonomy for the Office of the Auditor General. The Office of the Auditor General for Lagos State must be able to hire, fire, discipline, recruit its personnel without any interference at all from anybody. That office is only answerable by Section 125 of the Constitution. The Constitution is supreme. To the House of Assembly through the Public Accounts Committee. It is not answerable to the governor. Yes, the governor can appoint based on the recommendation of the board and then the approval of the State Assembly. But that office is only answerable to the State Assembly. Then again, the annual report of the Auditor General submitted to the Parliament annually, the full audit report published online, not the audited financial statement. The Citizens Accountability Report published annually. We want to see elements of civil society and media participating in the work of the public accounts and that of the Auditor General. Those are the elements we want to see. And until we see that, before Lagos State begin to pass the accountability
do you
test.
buy, what about the explanation that the governor is, some consider it an explanation about those figures, saying, look, it's an Excel spreadsheet error, so it shouldn't be taken out of context?
I think it was Ayo who was saying that he could accommodate 1 0, 2 zeros,
Yeah.
But when zeros continue to, manufacture themselves, you want to. Again, is that yes, there could be human error in how data are imputed into the spreadsheet, but certainly not that kind of extensive error. If you want to write 20,000, you certainly cannot write 200 million in place of 20,000. So you certainly cannot write 2 billion in place of 2 million, they
are far apart. Basic usage, if that figure differs there, you see that the bottom line.
Because before you get to 2 billion, you get to 200 million. And so once you put 200 million, the total figure changes. And then again is that what you are putting must be in conformity with the budget that was approved for that agency. So once you see that, I mean, the way the spreadsheet works is very simple, very, very simple. You can see at a glance. Once you see the agency, the particular agency, there is an approved sum headline.
Definitely.
And if you see the breakdown,
the figures differ.
Exactly. So when you put the breakdown at the total, it will differ from the headline. So you'll be able to flag it easily to say, okay, there's an error there. And then you look at the line items, where is the error? So if we're actually diligent and ensuring and trying to ensure that we're actually accountable, these are things that we'll pay attention to.
I wanted to also ask you if you, because before now there had been questions as to whether or not how transparent the Lagos State government was with regards to its budget. I know that you have been very big, and you and PLSI, you have been very big on auditing, and that's where you've done a lot of the work that you've done as civil society. But do you also pay attention to the budget of not just Lagos State government, but other subnationals?
No,
and what do you find?
No, absolutely. You see, because before you get to audit, you move to budget. And like I said, before the budget, you look at the policy statement, you look at the policy direction of the government. That's where the budget emanates from. And then you go to procurement, and then come to audit. We look at the budget. And for instance, we see credibility issues around the budget. For instance, you see differences, now not just in Lagos State, it's a national problem. It's a national problem. So we're not isolating Lagos. We're only just focusing on Lagos. You said?
Credibility issues.
No,
is that
certainly.
Manipulation or what?
No, see, when, for instance, you put up a budget, you know that your capacity to generate revenue, for instance, is maybe 50 billion. Not even, how many states even do 50 billion? Maybe 20, 30 billion. And then your federal transfers, maybe total, maybe 70 billion. So maybe 100 billion, inflows, for the whole year. And then you craft a budget for 300 billion. That gives you a sense. You want to go borrowing. You want to go, and then, you just be, reckless about borrowing and keep borrowing. And then sometimes you don't even get the borrowing because what is the liquidity of the state to be able to pay back the borrowings? So you then realize that and that's where the problem now is. You then realize that chief executive of state will not now focus on capital spending that is of priority to citizens because the funds do not come in. And you have crafted the budget in such a way that allows you to spend on operations, to spend on overheads, to spend on salaries, which is of priority, I understand. But when the funds now start coming in, you then pay more attention to that and leave the funds that you've allocated to capital spending with not cash backing it. And then again is that what then happens? You then continue to see this development deficit, on the ground. And that's a problem with budgeting. But again is that the concern that we've always had with budgets, and I always say it, it's not enough to say you have allocated monies here and there. Even the ones you have allocated, how have you utilized it? And what is the delivery on the ground in terms of development? If you said you wanted to intervene in healthcare, in education, and you would see that when you compare monies that are allocated to development sectors, and you compare it with what is provided for salaries, overheads, and emoluments of politicians and political appointees, there's that huge variance.
So those figures are available. I mean, there have been those who say, "Oh, we don't really see a breakdown of the budget of the Lagos State government."
No, they are available now. They are available now. But what I'm saying is that that is not. It's a means to an end. It is not an end in itself. Mm-hmm. The point is what happens after you've provided the budget data.
So usually, what people have problems with are with the line items. So you can see right there. Some of the snapshots that have gone viral, allocation for fragrance, and then, those are the controversial figures which the deputy governor has debunked in terms of things that have gone to the wife of the deputy governor for outreaches. Yes, outreaches. And he, even though he said, look, that's not how much has come to the wife of the deputy governor, there are people who have said, oh, should you even have those kinds of things in the budget in the very first instance? So, and then when you also look at things like SUV, bulletproof SUV in the office of the chief of staff, some people will also say, what are we doing with that? One. And then if you look at the cost of it, assuming we really needed one, assuming one were, were to be justified and was defended that, or one was really needed, would it really be at that cost? So are there ways that we are able to check and balance? Are there ways we're able to, is there a defense mechanism whereby people are made to defend some of the things that have been requested or have been assigned in the budget, and then also check the figures that are really given to those things in the budget?
No, certainly there are. You see, when people, so for instance, budget is an estimate, and that's why, it's an estimate. It's an estimate. So you really cannot, hold people to say, oh, when you say budget item, and because in budgeting, you provide for inflation, you provide for so many contingencies. And that's why it's called an estimate. Where the problem now is do you have a procurement process that is competitive, that allows allows every ordinary citizens, to play in that space, such that when you open up a bidding process, everybody can apply. And then what is the process like in terms of transparency in selecting who wins the award at the end of the day? Those are the real issues, and that's where the procurement laws need to be looked into very critically. To say, okay, yeah, the budget is an estimate, but when you come to procurement, when you open up the bidding, do you allow everybody to come in to say, okay, I can give a competitive price. If someone is going to deliver at 400 million, I can deliver at 250 million. And then who then do you go for? And that's where you now begin to assess, the value for money element. Then when the auditor now comes in, can ask question, why did you go for 400 million against 250 million? Those are the issues.
And they are very important issues, because considering how states clamp down on businesses, on companies, people work really hard to pay taxes. So these questions have got to be answered, really. But let's go to Lagos. I just got questions and go to guests as well.
And we have with us here Mr. Kolawole Oludare, who is a good governance advocate, and he's also deputy director with SERAP. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Good morning.
I know you have quite a lot of things to say to this, but let's begin with the fact that first of all, let's identify the fact that we indeed invited the Lagos state government. We are still waiting for confirmation of sorts to ensure that, just to put that out there, that we attempted to quite significantly too between yesterday and today to bring the Lagos state government representatives into the studio, but that has not happened yet. However, these issues need to be raised. Let's begin with the response, or the comments of the Lagos State House of Assembly ordering a probe into this whole melee. They have invited the Lagos State Procurement Agency for conversations. What do you make of that?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it's very important to underscore that this issue, as we've seen in Lagos State, and it's pervasive, it's a national issue, is an issue of transparency and accountability. This is not about politics. And within this concept of transparency and accountability, we understand it is a means to good governance. There are various stakeholders, call them players, signal players, in a democracy. The House of Assembly also had a process initially. And now the process they want to undertake now, it's laudable, it's good. But again, it shouldn't be reactive, because they also have oversight processes. So let's look at the budgeting, for instance. The budget naturally was presented by the governor to the State House Assembly, who have the power at that time to look at the line items, to even call the ministries, departments, and agencies to defend whether this amount should be on the budget at all, and as to amount. They have that power at that time. And they also have power to inquire of the executive. How do you hope to fund this whole budget? If that has passed that stage and that budget has been passed, and now the implementation, don't forget, even the procurement law of Lagos State 2021, as amended, also went to the State House Assembly. So the State House Assembly has a wide view. If you ask me, they're at a vantage point. So if they are ordering a probe now, the question is, what did they do initially? Can they retrace their steps to see what had gone wrong and where? And like I've mentioned earlier, this is not certainly limited to Lagos. It's everywhere. So I think it's very important that we look forward to the result of this probe. But I fear that it becomes another knee-jerk reaction. Perhaps we can even call it tokenism. And let them keep quiet. Let's do it for a while, and then possibly it will go away. But the commitment of the State of Assembly will be seen during that investigation. You call it an investigation, I don't think it is. To see how they're able to look at all those steps to harmonize it, including the process of procurement itself and who has gotten what, when, and how. But if the State of Assembly was there when over 400 million was budgeted to buy a Jeep, so which questions are they going to ask now? Is it about the volume, the quantum, or about the procurement process that would have led to acquiring that? And again, so that is much more important than this act of tokenism that I think this is.
I actually, now when you mentioned the 400 million naira SUV, it brings to mind some of this, a portion of this document that I saw, which has quite a number of items listed under the office of the Chief of Staff. And I want to believe that that would be referring to the office of the Chief of Staff to the governor. And it's quite a number of things, a good number of them, in billions and tens of billions and all of that. I don't know much about budgeting. Is that the right way to go about those things? Because some of those things, for instance, some of them are probably going to local governments, some of them to some other offices and all of that. What do you make of that? Is that a proper process, in terms of accountability?
It's very important. It's very good that we're talking about this now, which is why citizens should have been involved in that process in the beginning, which is where, again, that budget went to the National Assembly, the State of Assembly, rather, pardon me, and it is believed as part of their functions of passing that budget, which was, I think, was over 1 trillion at that time in 2022. They had looked at all this. They have the power not only to look at figures, but even to look at line items, to ask questions. Did they ask those questions then? And I think it is really important that Nigerians ask them this question. And like I've said, this is not limited to Lagos. So if you look at the good work that civil society organizations have done, I would like to refer to the work of Budget in this instance. You go to the website that they've created, put all the budgets of Nigerian states there. You would see that, for instance, in the 2023 budget in Osun State, 6 billion was allocated to the office of the governor. That's the budget. We've not seen the procurement to see how that has been spent. Also, if you look at Delta State, Delta is what? It was 22 billion to the office of they call it the protocol office. So again, these budget lines, because these are appropriation laws, as it were, went through the State of Assembly and they were passed. But Ayo, what do you expect? When even the federal government is towing the same line, I don't want to say they are towing the same line, they set the pace. We are yet to recover from the money that was budgeted for yacht. We are yet to recover what happened under the Buhari administration about the huge chunks of money that were related to the State House Clinic, which, as investigation found out, wasn't even well at the normal infrastructure. So it will become something of what the Yorubas will say, if you pardon me, Mr. Ayo, of Egbini Ote. And to those who don't speak Yoruba, that would mean that an offshoot, you are killing some and another shoots up in his place. So we shouldn't be surprised. This has gone on for long. And it would appear that the impunity continues to grow in the absence of the rule of law.
You haven't really spoken to, okay, so let's look at some of these slides. I think the two that many people find quite significantly infuriating, if I can use that word, is one of them which you have mentioned. 440.7 million naira budgeted for procurement of a brand new Lexus 600 LX bulletproof sport utility vehicle for the office of the Chief of Staff.
And that's what I've mentioned, Ayo. This budget went to the State Assembly in Lagos. They looked at it and they approved it. So if they are conducting an investigation, are they into the amount or how much it was bought? And that is why in this instance, when we talk about transparency and accountability,
the function of it, is that to say that there is...
Of course, they have the right at that time to look at it, which is why they call it budget defense. They have the right to call the various MDAs, including the office that is meant to use the car, to ask, why do you want this car? Why this particular car? That is why they represent Nigerians in that bit. And don't forget, budget, when it is passed, becomes law. It is appropriation law. So at that point, they have the powers to do so. I doubt if they did a good job of it, if that has passed as budget. And so that answers the question. So if it is infuriating Nigerians now, then we should ask questions. Ask the Civil Assembly questions. Why did they pass it when it came before?
I mean, maybe the reason I'm raising, okay, for instance, look at the other one, because people are just going to continue to ask the questions. Look at the monthly service charge for cleaning of the Lagos House and Presidential Lodge Marina, VIP Lodge, and Parkview. 15.3 million naira times 12.
I can't do the maths. It's beyond my level of mathematics. And that has gone on for long. Again, not only in Lagos, but across Nigeria. Do you wonder why we're broke? And there's something I need to point out. It is a good development that we have these budgets to look at this time, but we also need to look at history. In fact, it took the intervention, and I call it intervention, it's something of a paradox, of the World Bank through what is called the SIFTAS program, States Transparency and Financial Accountability Program, to encourage Nigerian states to be transparent and accountable, including, among other things, to put their budgets online. The program ran from 2018 to 2020. That is one of the major reasons why we have these budgets, even in the public domain. And there was a facility of $750 million to encourage and motivate state governors to do it. Does that not show you what we understand as democracy? So in the practice of that kind of democracy, of course, naturally, we will see this kind of issues.
You know, let me quickly ask you, Madam Eneobi, because, you know, a good number of these issues, you know, that people are irked about. People continue to wonder what in the world we're talking about, Madam Obi. So now that this is out, it's another time that budgets are being prepared. It's another time that states, you know, are preparing their budgets for presentation to their houses of assembly. The question that I'd like to ask you is, how? We know we're supposed to pay attention to what the states are doing, but the question is, how should the people be doing this? When we talk about accountability, to a large extent, many people are looking at the federal government, looking at the president, looking at the National Assembly. Hardly do people look at the states and the states' houses of assembly. How would you suggest that people will begin to call their governments out in the name of accountability?
Thank you very much, Ayo. I think a lot of things that is happening is about the issues of the procurement or the issues, even the budget process. How does it start? I was a governance team leader for ActionAid for a couple of years, and the public finance analysis, we started the issue of looking at or having budget summits every year. You know, at that time, we're having budget summits every year, and we're having it at the states where we also had projects, and then we go into the national, you know, budget summit. When a lot of people are not taking the budget very seriously. We have seen cases where in some states in this country, budget as bulky as it is, that budgets were passed overnight, meaning that members of the assembly do not take cognizance of the importance of the budget as a document. The budget, once it's passed, is a law. And before you pass it, as a parliamentarian, have you taken your time to look at the budget? One of the processes we used to do as civil society organizations is to look at the budget of the past year, the current year, and then the next one, so that we're able to project certain things. And in the acts of budget monitoring, you are able to see, if you can have that document of the past year and the year that the current year and the year that is coming, you are able to make projections. You are also able to look at some line items that are down. We are looking at the documents, you know, from the Lagos State now. You're looking at, you know, when they say the office of the deputy governor's wife, is it the deputy, you know, I don't know if there is an office like that, but having 36 million every month, that is amounting to about 432 million in a year. And then you are looking at also the servicing that they are talking about, servicing of even meetings, committee meetings, 30 million per, you know, annual or monthly, and then it gets to that. So you are able to pick up line items. Budget is a live wire of an administration. If you don't take it seriously, the way we take it that in 2 days, if if the government is able to send the budget, they make a budget presentation, I advise that the government, the parliament will take their time, go through that. And that's why in the case of even the bigger, the national parliament, if you are not looking at the budget, then so many things can be swept through the carpet. There is one line item that if you check the last 10 years of an administration, those documents will be there. The corruption level. And we're looking at people dying. If you're not paying salaries, if the inflation that is happening is causing the death of so many people. Yesterday, I had to, the lady who had a baby and they have been discharged for almost a week. They had no money to pay bills. There's so many things happening that
Madam, the question that I'm asking you.
I was a taxpayer in Lagos for more than 20
1 second,
years.
madam, if you can hear me.
When you look at the money that is being spent.
Madam, just 1 second, if you can hear me. The question that I'm asking is, how do people, the constituents in the various states, 36 states of Nigeria, begin to call out their government, hold their governments accountable? All we can do here in the studio, there in Abuja, here in Lagos, is to raise the issues and call people to attention so that they can focus on these things. Mr. Oluwadare speaking here the other time said, budget, for instance, has provided a platform that people can go check out. So how do you suggest that the people in the states, in Sokoto State, in Zamfara State, in Borno State, in Bauchi State, in Kebbi State, call their governments out and hold them accountable for the responsibilities on their hands?
Thank you. We have public accountability forum in different states across the country. We also have the tax justice civil society organizations. We have so many civil societies around. Civil society organizations. We are calling on all citizens. If we don't hold government accountable, they are not going to be accountable. If we don't hold, transparency and accountability is an issue. Openness and transparency is, when you have the corruption perception index, a lot of the reasons why some countries are scoring higher is that they open their books to the public and say, come and look at what we're doing. But we're talking about the Auditor General's report. Even at the federal level, most of these documents, one of the Auditor Generals was very, very, courageous to make a whole presentation, and nobody has taken it seriously. So many agencies are not giving reports to even the federation account, and they are getting money. And then it's not only in terms of the budget release, having the budget, timely release of the funds. Many of the funds are not released. Maybe now they are releasing some funds now, and there is no way they can spend it. Okay. And the rule is that by 15th of December, you turn back the money, and so on. So we're calling on civil society organizations, citizens, don't leave it to civil society organizations.
Okay.
The quality of citizenship is being dealt with. The courage to be able to stand for truth. And if we are not holding people accountable, I think there's a lot of insanity in the land. They are stealing everything. They are taking all the money of the country, and we are getting poorer. This is one of the greatest countries in the world.
All right,
we
Madam,
have money.
Let me quickly take on Mr. Lemo, because just so we can do a little better with timing. Mr. Lemo, I'm sure you've seen some of those issues that have been raised in the reports and even in public domain now. By the way, I went on the Public Procurement Agency's website. I saw all of the reports from January 2023 to, I think, October or November 2023, but July is missing. I wonder why. Anyway, look at this. One of the issues that has been raised is the Lagos State government spending on provision of furniture items at campaign office. It's also one of the issues, perhaps, in the same vein that Mr. Rosevival also raised. What do you make of this? Is it something that should be happening? Should government, any government at all, and Lagos State government in this case, be spending money to fund their political campaigning and all of that? Is it something that is proper? Is it part of the governance? Is that the reason for a political party winning the elections?
Absolutely not, really. Absolutely no. It's laughable. And when you see this kind of line items, I wonder what agency of government has that line item But in curing some of this terrible behavior is to further buttress what Kolawole said right there in Lagos. The role of the legislature. You see, when the budgets are prepared at the agency level, it's not open to the public. So the public doesn't have the opportunity to make input into that budget that is prepared at the agency level. What we often see is the consolidated budget that is presented by the chief executive, whether the president or the governor, as the case may be. And it's only after that budget has been presented to the parliament that whichever agency is responsible then now uploads it for citizens to now begin to interact with the data there. But the legislators at the state assembly, they have access. They see it. You wonder the kind of role they play around the budget process. Whether they look at these line items by line items and query it and ask questions as to whether these things are healthy and where this money is going to. And if they are able to then approve that budget like that, what was the sense behind it? What was the sense behind it? But it is good that these things are coming forth now. What will then want to know whether funds have been released to such line items and truly whether procurement has been initiated to then make such furniture available to the campaign office. Okay. But certainly that is irresponsible. Okay. You want to separate political activities away from how governance is run. But sometimes politicians sort of mix up these things. What I suggest that citizens do is that, for instance, it's difficult, like what Madam Enobi is saying here, the poverty level. So you can hardly have an ordinary citizen, pick up the budget document or an audit report and begin to read it for what?
All right, Mr. Lemo, let me quickly come back to Mr. Oluwadare.
Labor unions.
Yes, just a second. Let me come back to Mr. Oluwadare. I believe my colleagues in Abuja will also want to ask you a question or two. But looking at the issues raised by Mr. Doherty, looking at the responses of the Lagos state government, how satisfactory are the issues for you?
No, not satisfactory. As a matter of fact...
Even the comments of the governor?
Yes, not satisfactory. The idea behind the response is good because there is a response, that is good. But the subject, the substance of the response itself is not good enough. As had been said earlier, the figures, if it was a mistake, it would not add up. That's just logic, that's just fact. And then as to the basis for some of those budgets, again, it is not satisfactory. Those amounts can hardly be justified to the hungry Nigerian. It's not enough.
Okay. Well, let me reiterate that we indeed invited the Lagos state government. We're still waiting for their response. So I'll take this back to my colleagues in Abuja. Chamberlain, Marwa.
Well, yeah, so as we wind down now, Madam and gentlemen, so moving forward, what would you want to see? Because, I mean, if the office of the chief of staff has vehicles of, what, 440 million, you can imagine how much the office of the governor will have for vehicles. What do you want to see moving forward?
I think it's a shocking revelation, but these things have been there, and we want to call on the citizens, because there used to be budget hearing. There should be openness in terms of budget hearing, and these processes have been truncated over the years. Like you bring a budget, overnight it is passed. That is not allowed, because this is a law about everybody. If you are not accountable for the money that you are seeing, it means you are truncating the system, and you are also responsible for many deaths along the line. They are killers. And so we call on the civil society organizations. Lagos is a case in question, but we should look at all other states across the federation to look at their budgets. We insist on budget hearing, look at the budget details. Some people don't publish their own budgets, but a number of states now do publish. And we encourage that they look at, they are able to interact with their environments as well. But one thing that we need to also address is the capacity of the parliamentarians. We used to do a lot of capacity building, so I encourage, international partnership, budget partnership and the all the budgets and the host of others to continue to support the parliamentarians. Because even at the national level, we try to do that. If you are on health, for example, we look at the health budget for last year, this year, and the next one, what to look at and all of that. And so it's important for us to open our minds, and that citizens have a responsibility to hold government accountable. It's a position, it's a responsibility, it's an obligation to be able to, I really worry about the quality of the Nigerian, how accountable we are, and we must be able to project to that. Truth will live, it's a great country, we have these resources. Why go to spend money on an environment you want to buy one car for 400 and something million when people are not feeding? Are you in your right senses? Is there something we are missing here? And they are doing it also at the federal level, the parliament and all of that. A political class is, a major part of them are wasted.
Yeah, I think much of the issues have been touched on. But what I want to say is that, of course, we all know that budget is a law, right? Budget is a law. It's an appropriation law and must be implemented. So what goes into it, whether furniture for the governor's wife or kitchen utensils for housemaid, it has to be implemented. Once it goes into that document, the governor must, the relevant agency must release funds and all that. So before it becomes a law, what happens at the parliament level? They need to scrutinize it more properly and ensure that, what should go in actually goes in. Now, like I said, when the budgets are prepared at the agency level, citizens don't have access to it. But when they go to parliament, legislators have access, and they need to question and query some of these line items, to ensure that there is some sort of responsibility. What we're doing at our own level is to continue to support actors at the state level, and we have a project now supporting 5 states, including, Anambra, Ekiti, Kaduna, Yobe, and one other state. To support, legislators and actors to ensure that, they behave more responsibly and accountable.
We have to thank both of you for coming on. Madam Enobi is a immediate past country director for Action Aid, as well as former convener, Nigeria Civil Society Situation. We've also had Olusegun Elema, who is executive director, Paradigm Leadership Support Initiative, PLSI. Thank you both for coming on. Ayo.
Thank you for having us.
Well, thank you, Chamberlain, Mr. Kolawole Oluwadare, good governance advocate, human rights activist, and Deputy Director, Serap. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you very much.
We'll take a short break, and when we return, we'll take on our last issue for the day. Do stay with us.
Okay, welcome back. Sonny Osarabo joins us. He's a publisher. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
In light of all that is going on, certainly people want things to be done differently and better, to say the least. But we know that former vice president and candidate of the PDP for the last election has called for some sort of unification for political parties so that it can move forward. We've also had former President Obasanjo saying democracy as it stands now doesn't seem to be benefiting Africa. He wants Afro-democracy. And several others. Labour Party, the candidate, former presidential candidate, Peter will be talking about how we need to have proper electoral, probably political reforms. All these calls aimed at ensuring that we just get things right moving forward. So if you were to, give us your thoughts as to, first, all this calls, because these people have been in different offices, so people will always look back at what they've done as to what could have informed this call, how genuine or otherwise. How do you place all of this?
Yes, good morning. Thank you very much for having me. It is easy for people to come out and criticize, especially when they leave government. We all witnessed their stay, their tenure in government, and what they did. Many of them promised us so many things, juicy things, and at the end of the day, they ended up failing us. It is only when they come out of government that they seem to have their senses restored. I recalled an issue or a statement made by one of the aides to one of the presidents. He said, when you get to the villa, you seem to lose your senses. You cannot get it again. There's a particular thing that will not make you to reason straight. Most of them go there. They tell us, oh, they will hit the ground running. And at the end of the day, they run into the people.
Is that supposed to be tenable?
It's not tenable. So all these people coming out to tell us, oh, it's not Afrocentric, it's not this, it's not. What did they do when they when they were there?
Does it mean they're not making valid points?
They are not making valid points. This country, if you ask me, the political elites, they have been the one manipulating everybody. It is when they get out and they feel, oh, they do not have a way, they want to be relevant all the time.
So doesn't that then validate the point? You say they manipulate the people.
Yes.
Which they are saying that should change. So how is that not the point?
What they're asking for example, the former vice president talked about merger. We are not talking about merger. Merging on a structure that is already weak. The structure called Nigeria today can no longer take the weight of the decay in the country. There was a time somebody made a point that, look, let us break this thing down. The weight of what the quantum of the problems in Nigeria, one president cannot take it. Let us have 6 vice presidents who will take responsibility, who will take part of the burden away from the president. But so many people waved it aside. Obasanjo had been in and out. What did he do? Somebody said, let me say jokingly, he said, we have 3 organs of government. 3 organs. The executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. These organs have been there for over 110 years. When a man is using an organ for 110 years, would the organ not be weak?
So what do you suggest we do then if you don't seem to subscribe to the message, but rather looking at the messenger?
What we should do, we should be thinking of how to come to the round table, discuss the future of this country.
Haven't you done that before?
We have done that before. But those who criticize it, that it will not work, they are there now. And they were part of those who made promises to us.
Who are these people?
Yes, the present administration. The man who is heading it, President Bola Tinubu, when he was in NADECO, one of the major key strengths of their campaign was that this country needed to be restructured. This country needed to be destroyed. Up till now, it's still very valid. So much distrust among us. Everybody is thinking from his own corner. The judiciary is making a mess of itself.
How?
You get to the judiciary, for example, the judiciary led by Akpabio. I don't really know.
Judiciary or
Yes.
legislature?
Sorry, the legislator led by Akpabio. We talked about the last one, the Lawan, being a rubber stamp. This is like a photocopy. He flies off the handle. It makes statements he cannot actually buttress. That seems to make a mockery. The other day, it talked about payments being made into the accounts of members of the House in public glare. The other day too, he was in New York talking about a matter that is here at the High Court. No, sorry, Appeal Court. That he was already congratulating a candidate or somebody who is already in court. The governor is in court. No, Umo. That Umo, you had people ask, what kind of man is this? How does he want the other man in the other party, APC? How does he want them? Is he speaking the mind? Is he speaking the mind of the people about the judiciary?
Even though that's his own party is the APC.
Even though that's his own party. This is exactly what I was saying. That the man is becoming funny. Is he a comedian that we have in the house?
So you don't think it was just a joke?
That was a joke that went too far.
But are you happy to hear more clearly the voices of opposition? Yesterday we saw what happened on the floor of the Senate We've heard from former Vice President Atiku Abubakar calling for a merger. And we also saw yesterday presidential candidate of the Labour Party, Peter Obi, speaking up on within the office of the Labour Party, saying that he's not desperate to be president of Nigeria. What he's desperate for is to see a Nigeria that works. So are you happy that you're beginning to hear more and more of the voices of members of the opposition in this current dispensation?
Yes, it is a good thing. It is a good thing. It's a welcome development. But my fear is that how far can they push it through? Most of them, or Nigeria as it is now, poverty is a major problem. Everybody tends to pander to where the grass is green. Nobody wants to run counter of the man who is doling out the goodies. And you ask yourself, why have they been quiet all this while? They are supposed to be opposition.
So
why have they been quiet all this while?
If they do, they're damned if they
Yes,
don't, from your perspective.
That's right. All along they were waiting. After taking what they believe, this is my own share of juicy position. And now they just believe, okay, let us still make some noise. When they make
clearly,
the noise,
that's an accusation that it will be, we haven't interrogated us, so we don't know what exactly you may be referring to in terms of which one specifically. Now, that seems to be a generic statement, and you know how it is making such statements.
I agree, but if you take a critical look at the political situation of the country, if you take a look at what has been happening, people keep quiet at the beginning of the secession.
Secession?
The legislative secession.
Oh, okay.
Because they know that definitely a few things will come. And they don't want to upset the apple's cart.
Well, the people want things to be done better and differently, so that's why there's a lot of hue and cry from the people. So if they see what's not right, and that's why we also hear in the media, to ensure that we highlight all of those challenges, all of those things going on wrong, so that it can be corrected. We have to thank you for coming on, Sonny Osarabo, publisher and the public affairs analyst. Well, that is the show today. We do thank you all for watching. We'll see you again tomorrow. I'm Chamberlain Oso.
Well, we'll see your feedback. We apologize that we're not able to take them again today. Hussein from Surulere, Abiru Kenneth, Amechi Ogwele. Well, hopefully we should be able to take them soon. But thank you for watching. I'm Mark Yusuf.
And I'm Ayo Makinde. We also saw your message, Hussein from Surulere. Have a wonderful day.